I remember thinking, and the bubbles coming up in front of my face, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my air. If I breathe in, I'm gonna drown, and I'm gonna die. And the minute I like, it's almost like the minute I accepted that I was dying and this was like a dying event, I was ejected from my body. I just instantly was above it, watching it sink, and my hair floating through the water because I also I had the long hair, same as I do now. And so from there, it gets kind of interesting.
My guest today is Loreli Drache. Loreli has had 5 near-death experiences, the first at age 7, followed by others at age 28, 35, 48, and again just recently a few months ago. She has also experienced out-of-body, ET, Fae, Sasquatch, and orb contact, a Kundalini awakening, connection to Christ consciousness, after-death communication, human and animal, shared death, and many other types of spiritually transformative experiences. Lorelei, it is such a blessing to have you. You've had this amazing life full of incredible spiritual experiences. And I want to thank you so much for sharing all of your stories with the world.
Thank you so much for having me, Tia. And I am so thankful to be able to share these experiences. It's kind of why I agreed to come back after a few near-death experiences anyway. I was told to speak my truth, and because the world needed it, so to speak. And so here I
Well,
am.
the world definitely needs it. I can tell you that for certain. And so it's a personal favor to me that you are sharing. Thank you. And if you want to go ahead and start wherever you feel the beginning is, because there's so many experiences. There's probably, I don't even know where the beginning would be for you. Would it be your first near death experience, or did you have experiences prior to that?
Well, I was kind of born into a family that was very intuitive without realizing what that was. And I didn't find out till later, like their own experiences as far as my parents. I did grow up on a property that had a paranormal vortex in it, that I found out from a random experience with, I never say it right, a Heote empath, an elder at a powwow I just happened to be at almost an hour away from where I grew up, and he did this weird reading on me with these stones, and then he told me literally about where I grew up. So he knew, but at that time I was clueless, right? So yeah, our property had a lot of occurrences, with what we thought were ET. We had definitely had spirit contact and Sasquatch contact. Um, the footprints, the knockdown trees, the pounding, howling during the night, all of those things that are familiar with Sasquatch. So there was that already going on by time, I was born. And so I know I remember my mother saying I was a very old soul. You couldn't tell me anything from the moment I could talk, which I laugh about because, it's very fitting to my personality, I suppose. But my first near death experience, like you mentioned, was at 7. So it's hard to relate to who or what was I before that, other than I remember, being more accepted prior. Okay. What happened on that, what we call fateful day that started this journey, was my aunt and uncle lived next door. My grandfather's farm was next door to ours. We lived on 191 acres in rural Wisconsin. So it used to be a quarry. So they struck springs, natural springs, when they were digging, so that stopped their progress. And it formed about 5 ponds, I want to say, or so, 6, that some were interconnected, as was the one that I had this experience at. That particular day, my aunt and uncle came over and they were visiting while my mom, it was like around supper time. So my brother wanted to go check if the bluegills were spawning, because that happens to be, so it must have been spring. And one of our ponds was known for that. It had a very shallow end. So my mom, because she was cookies, like, take your little sister with you. So my aunt and uncle took me and my brother down to the pond. It was probably about almost a mile walk. This particular pond, like I said, there was a shallow end, and there's a giant area over there. But it most times in spring, because of the thaw, would be connected to the other end, which we made into a swimming hole. It was about 30-foot deep. And next to that was like what we called the frog pond. I love that area because I could always play with the tadpoles and watch the frogs grow. So my aunt took me down to that area while my uncle and brother went to the shallower end to check on the fish. Well, I was always enthralled with the water. I'm a Pisces, so it makes sense now, and I do a lot of energy work with water. But so I was drawn down. There's an embankment and then like a pier that they built out of like pallets and posts. And so I went out on the pier to look at the water, and my aunt didn't know how to swim, neither did I, so she wouldn't come out there. She was kind of afraid of water, so that's very relevant. And I was on the one side closest to where like my brother and uncle were as far as directional. And it must have been later afternoon as well. I say this because the sun was starting to set, so it hit the water just right. So it was kind of mesmerizing, and I felt like almost like I was being pulled in, and that wooziness you get if you watch the water ripple. Yeah, so, um, I decided to move to the other side because I was worried I would fall in. So I'm at the other side, and at this point is when my aunt was like, "I wanna go check on your uncle." She had kinda like a separation anxiety when it came to him, like, she never liked him out of her sight or to be too far from him. So I was like she's like, "You'll be okay." I'm like, "Oh, of course, da, da, da." You have to remember, people always say, "Oh, who would leave a 7-year-old out on a pier," right? But we're farm people, and that's a little different if you haven't been raised with that because you have responsibility from a very young age, and there's that mindset. And I had always been, like, more mature for my age, like, I handled a lot of, things. So I was like, "Yeah, I'll be just fine." So she took off back down the path to check on my uncle. Now, from this point and the point I got in the water, I have no recollection of whatsoever, nor does it make sense to me because you normally, if you're falling off, you'd fall head first. But the minute became aware, I was sinking feet first. So I still don't understand how this happened. Um, so my recollection from that point kind of all is congruent rather than, like simultaneously. Because I remember thinking and the bubbles coming up in front of my face, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's my air. If I breathe in, I'm gonna drown, and I'm gonna die." And the minute I like it's almost like the minute I accepted that I was dying and this was like a dying event, I was ejected from my body. I just instantly was above it watching it sink and my hair floating through the water because I also I had the long hair same as I do now. And so from there, it gets kind of interesting. I mean, the part that like you became one with consciousness because I could see everything and what everyone was doing, but I could also hear their thoughts. It's like I connected with their consciousness. My brother was the first consciousness I connected with because he was he had heard my aunt scream and yell, they must have heard me fall in. And he was thinking, can I swim to her or can I run to her faster? And here I am. I honestly found it very comical. I was, like, totally not attached to my body or caring what was going on. I just thought it was funny that he thought he could do that. Um, so it was very surreal, I guess you would say. And then I went to my uncle who was next to him, and he was just worried, mostly the fault. They're gonna blame us. We were supposed to be watching her, like, how why did she walk away? All of these things. Um And then it went to my aunt who was closest to me, ironically, and with her, it was just like she was trying to figure out how she could get to me and the whole guilt thing, they're gonna blame us, but moreover, like, "I can't swim. How am I supposed to get to her? How can I save her? I'm the closest. What am I supposed to do?" And so she had figured out, like, she could hang on to the edge of it and just try to, like, keep reaching for me and scooping for me, trying to reach my body. So, meanwhile, that was all going on. Next, I rose higher. I could see for miles, and I connected with my mom's consciousness. Like I had, I had to like see her before I leave. I guess my mom and I were very close, and she was just wondering what we caught fishing, what was going on, when will we be back? And she was just busy making, I believe it was chili. And that time of year, it was, I know she was chopping vegetables, and that's usually for her chili. Um, and so the minute I did that, then I was like in this total ethereal space. It was like rolling clouds. It was like being in the clouds is kind of how it fogs into my memory. And there was this being next to me, but I knew there was, but it's like I didn't see that person. It was like a guide. And they brought me to this space, and there was this big archway off to the left, uh, that this light was emanating. And this light, it still stays with me, and I call on it when I need it. It went from like the brightest white light, like 1,000 LEDs, to like yellow, orange, amber, and it encompassed your whole vision, it felt like. And there was the most intense love and peace and a sense of home. You just didn't I can't describe it, I get teary-eyed. But it's like a maternal love amplified to infinity, and you just, like, felt one with it. Um and I just remember, like, being shown things, but yet not being able to remember what they were, but just saying, like, "You can't make me go back. I'm not going back to that. There's no way," you know? And that felt like it went on for centuries. I mean, it was I know I'm using these exaggerations, but it was so expansive. It didn't feel like it happened in a second. It felt like there was a lot of long conversations of why I needed to go back. But I just kept refusing, like, "You can't make me go back to that. There's no way I'm living through that. No, no, no." Until this big, it felt just this expansive male voice just boomed. And this one wasn't like the other ones felt more like within me. This one did not. And it was very loud, male, authoritative. And it says, "You must go back. You have more to do." And you just knew in your soul, because I felt like a little ant. Like I was tiny compared to like this light and like the faded being that seemed to be within this light, but you couldn't look at. And I felt so tiny, and I was just like, "Yeah, okay." But I was more like, "Okay, you can make me go back, but they can't make me go in my body." It was this weird thing, like, "I'm not getting in there, but you can make me go back. I'll go sit with it, but you're not making me." 'Cause as soon as I'm like, "Okay, okay," like, really contrite, I was with my body. They had brought it up that embankment that I mentioned, and I was laying on its side. I didn't see that there was any ill effects. I wasn't coughing up water or anything. As far as I recall and was told, I didn't speak to the next day. And I still was like beside my body. It's like I was with it, but not in it. And the next day, I just remember we had these like old Victorian captain chairs, and I was sitting at the end of, because my house was like 200 years old. It was the first house in the county with a well and running water, and it was an old Victorian farmhouse. And so I was sitting at the captain's chairs at the base of the steps, and I just remember saying something to my brother, and his jaw kind of falling and his face getting white. Like, there's no way. My body was underwater. How did I know what he was thinking? How did I know what he was doing? There's no way. And I remember telling my mom, like, I died. I know I died. But like I said, because of previous experiences and things, my family was open to that. So it wasn't like they thought I lied about it or it was just a false memory or anything. And I believe that night, it kept replaying like a dream, the whole experience. And like I said, I wasn't able to speak. But the interesting part about all of it was, like I said, I didn't feel like I connected with my body for at least a year. Like I was there, but not present. I remember I used to like sing these really melodious things, and all I wanted to do was be on my swing because it made me feel free and out of body, I think. And we had this big barn, and it had a metal roof, and I would just sing these weird melody. Like now you might call it light language or angelic. Like I think I was probably singing what I had heard. You know what I mean? I didn't know where I heard it from. It wasn't like I was singing words, and I would just do that and kind of kept to myself. But it was almost like I went back, I wanna say this, to a different timeline. I often say that I have a timeline transplant because each time I've come back, it's not quite the same, and I don't know if it's just because I'm not the same, but, uh, because my family, it just seemed like I was disassociated from them. everything that they were about, I just couldn't absorb or be like. They were hunters and farmers, they killed animals, and just the whole mentality of what their lifestyle was, and they partied a lot. So I think it maybe made him feel judged. I'm not sure. And my mother used to say I was tactlessly honest. I didn't realize I was reading people's energies or their thoughts. So I just called them out on it. Now I know as an adult, I was basically calling them out. Nobody likes that, right? So it took me a long time to learn discernment, what to say, what not to say. I had prophetic dreams. Kids would say, "You're weird, but in a good way." I didn't fit. So I knew things. I could tell when people were leaving their body to cross home. They'd look like wax dummies. I usually like 2 weeks before. If they were somebody close to me, I'd become very ill, so I knew something was about to come. In later years, it was pregnancy. I knew what souls are coming in and what gender and things. But so, I did come back with some of those type of abilities.
Yeah, so that is very profound. And to be able to validate the experience with your brother and your mother with what they were doing, um, well, that just must have made everyone know that, hey, something really truly happened here. Was your family accepting of this, or did they try to deny it or ignore it?
Well, I didn't talk about it a lot. Um, they got where, like, if I said I saw something or I knew something was about to happen, like, my mom became my biggest advocate. So I was a young child, so, like, I wasn't comfortable approaching people about things I knew that were gonna happen to them. But it got to later in life, enough of it was validated that, "Lori said this," and they're like, "Nope, then I'm not doing it." Like, my sister was supposed to take a flight with her fiancé, and I didn't think anything was gonna happen to the flight, but there was just a reason they were not supposed to go. And, the fact that they listened to me was very validating because so much other things had come true for people that, like I said, my family started to accept it, you know. But it it was weird because I had my siblings that I grew up with, because my sisters were 10 and 12 years older. So by the time I was this age, they were already out of the house and married. So I grew up with my 2 brothers who were 5 and 6 years older, and, they became kind of very abusive and would call me the mailman's child, and, there was a lot of sibling rivalry, I guess, because my brother was a baby for 5 years, so I came along, and he was not happy I was there, but it just felt like that wasn't the reality I left before my near-death experience. So that was very confusing to me. But like I said, my mother was very supportive, but she used to ask me a question, and a lot of people do, even on her deathbed. Um, like, if you knew there's heaven, or from these experiences there's an afterlife, why wouldn't you live your life differently here? And that's a pretty deep question. And the whole thing I was given about that was, we came here for that experience, to learn to master our feelings, because emotions create words, thoughts powered by emotion create our reality. And so to have these experiences and to have a human body was a gift, and to be able to experience sensations in a 3D form, because through my experiences I have learned that, at least for me, I'm this light energy, that has consciousness. So to have a physical form is something like these fractals of consciousness, that's a prized thing. Even though we think we come here and suffer and experience chaos, um, it's a gift to experience. So for her, I was like, I'm still human. I'm supposed to have this human story, and I'm going to experience things, and I'm going to do things that maybe are not loving, and maybe they're for someone's growth or my growth. But when we're here, that's what we're supposed to be doing, you know? And so I just wanted to share that as well.
And you said that it took about a year for you to fully integrate back into your body. After you fully integrated back in your body, aside from feeling like maybe you were in a different timeline. Did you start to feel more human then at that point, or did you still have connections to the other side?
Yeah, yeah, I think I would say I integrated more back into the human storyline. I took on a lot of guilt, grief, and like I said, my siblings were a little abusive with tormenting, calling names, physically, um, you know, yeah, and I remember a lot of instances being smothered or dragged by my hair, things like that that were very traumatic for me because you came from this huge loving space into a place of trauma, and it was still foreign. So I think the more those things happened to me, the more I was rooted into the storyline, you know um maybe even taking on a little bit of a victim mentality that comes with trauma. um and I remember, but, like, by 15, they were I mean, I know, uh, and this relates back to things, my other death experience, so I kinda wanna touch base on this. I had a lot of health type things appear. I didn't realize I was connecting to other people's energies and taking on different things. Um, so from the time I was very young after that experience, I had this really sharp pain under my right ribs that would double me over. My mother took me to so many doctors, couldn't figure it out, and by the time I was 15, I was having these weird incidents. They thought I had a brain tumor or something. I had to go for all these MRIs and different things because, like, half my body would go numb or I'd blank out. And then they even thought I was narcoleptic later. I mean, they just were throwing diagnoses at me left and right for all of these things. So there was that as well. So it became very convoluted in the sense of I still had my abilities. I would channel a lot of poetry. I didn't realize at the time it was channeled. I mean, it just would flow through me, and there was times I'd wake up in the middle of the night with these things I would write. Um, but other than that, yeah, I was much more anchored in the physical. Um, and a lot of those things played out as far as the patterns kept repeating.
Mhm.
Then I chose a relationship that was equally verbally and physical, and it just, and I'm not sure where some of those things came from, but I get now why I said, no way am I going back to that. So I know some of it was predetermined, but in the end, it, co- I am so thankful and grateful because each of those things expanded me and my understanding and my compassion. Um, and something I was taught, I always say I'm a remembrance guy, but most people call it being a healer. But one thing they said to me about that was I couldn't I couldn't reach people at a vibration I never experienced. So all of those things I experienced, all of the like I had like 16 autoimmune diagnoses by the time I said I'm done being sick, right? Um, help me reach those that are in that vibration to raise theirs. All of those experiences brought me to who I am now. And I also get their perceptions because I realized once I was in the observer view, like some of those things, I didn't realize or take my accountability and responsibility for how they played out or my part in it or the triggers I may have caused. So I just wanted to share that because through this whole process and each NDE, expands my perception in the observer creator view of why everything transpires, where people are off operating from. The other thing that happens with near death, I think, is you come back seeing everybody as this pure love and light within them. I could see their souls, their reasons for being. And then you kind of become, where people say a doormat, because and accept them at a soul level. Uh, but you forget it's okay to set boundaries in the physical because they're still playing that storyline. They can still cause harm, and so that differentiation and discernment took me a lot of years to put up those boundaries. And coming back so empathic, I realized, I was taking on all these symptoms. My patients would always say, because I became a medical assistant, that I made them feel better, but I was taking on a lot of those frequencies to the point my immune system shut down. That's when I left healthcare. And I had to go on so many steroids. I blew up like a balloon. My eyes were slanted. My skin ripped open. Not to get too graphic, but it was a terrible time. And that's what led to my second near death experience. So
I was just going to ask about what was, so you were 7 when this first near death experience happened, and then by the time you were probably 9ish, you were completely integrated back on Earth in your body, and then yeah. So tell us about the next transformative experience you had.
um, this one's a little different because I don't have a lot of memory of the experience other than knowing that I had one. Because my grandmother came to me in a vision about 2 weeks before this near death experience, which I think was February 27th, 2000. I was 28 years old. My husband and I have been trying to get pregnant for years. I didn't even want to get married unless we could have a family because I didn't think that was fair to him. And I had just become pregnant, and we had heard the baby's heartbeat and at 4 weeks, I think it was, I had a way of knowing when I was pregnant. So my doctor just, after a while, yeah, he's like, okay, if she says she is, she is. Because I'd always know way ahead of time than before a test could. So I had already had, like I said, this test. Um, and what happened was at a follow-up one, they couldn't hear a heartbeat. But anyway, my grandmother had come to me about 2 weeks prior to my experience, and she said to me, this baby is not yours to keep. There will be others. Don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. And she showed me like sitting in a clinic, uh, which was the waiting room of the clinic I go to my OBGYN, and then a calendar with the date on it of what day I was going to lose my baby. Well, that day came. I was actually watching my nephews and younger cousins while their parents were out doing something with my husband, and I started to spot really heavily. I was in intense pain, so they took me to him and my mother took me to the ER, and they decided I needed an emergency DNC. They were really mad at my doctor for letting me go on because I chose not to have one. I wanted my body to do it naturally, or maybe the test was wrong. I always left the benefit of the doubt. So the doctor was very upset that I was in this position, and I remember that as well. So they took me for emergency DNC. Since they didn't have really any time to prepare, they gave me the anesthesia for my weight. Well, I'm very sensitive. I can't even take a full dose of anything. So I stopped breathing and was bleeding out. The doctor told me the next day, like, he almost lost me because he was very mad because I was adamant to go off all the medications because they were trying to stop the bleeding. And I told him, no, 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 I'm fine. And I even told everyone I was fine. I had a party scheduled that night that they couldn't believe I just went with it. But I was told that this is what was supposed to happen and that everything would be okay. And I had the same after effects as my first death experience. In my later experiences, they told me I went home for healing. I didn't need to remember anything. I went home for healing so that I could have children, because I kept having this vision about this son I was supposed to have, these abilities later played out. But so I knew I was supposed to have these children. So it was rather interesting. And the doctor confirmed exactly what my grandmother had said, that my body was trying to prepare to have children. But this baby, her systems didn't interconnect. And it was a girl, which I had known already. And, she did that. She just wanted to experience a body. She did that for me. It's kind of this agreement we had. Um, so it was rather emotional. My husband could not come to grips with it. He blamed himself. I'm not sure why, other than an experience he had with an ex who, chose to have an abortion. So he felt like he was getting, punished somehow. So there was a lot of more consoling him, and I think the main trigger is as we were leaving the hospital, this other woman who was struggling to be in labor, and they almost lost her as well. finally gave birth to the baby, the nurses all had to start running because I guess I'm not sure there was complications. So they left us just standing there in the hallway, and we could hear that baby screaming, and so that just compounded the experience, you know. But I was so happy for that baby, but I felt so sad for that poor doctor because he almost lost 2 women that night, right? And so he was so angry. He's like, "Fine, go off those pills. I only had to save you," you know. He was, because I worked there, you have to understand as well. So they knew me on a personal basis too, and he was just really mad at me for but I felt fine and I just wanted out of there. I'm like, these drugs are making me feel worse. I just want out, you know, I'm fine. So I know I was also healed, you know what I mean? Because prior to that they were still having trouble um getting the bleeding to stop. And I remember waking up, you know, on the ventilator and them telling me I can't talk and that, you know, I hadn't been breathing and they thought, you know, that I had passed. But so that was my second death experience. But it really helped me accept that I had lost this baby. Like I said, we tried for so long, and to understand why. And um, so my doctor said that if I wanted to have any more children, I needed to try right away. And so I became pregnant the same year, had a baby the same year, which was my son. And yes, he was born with abilities. So it was, and the interesting part I like to talk about with this, I was in labor 27 hours. My mother said I looked like I was about ready to pass. It was a very extreme birth. He became kind of stuck, and um, I had all this pre-birth communication with my son. And he had told me how he was coming into the world and that the cord would be wrapped around his neck twice and not to push or he would die. So I was not surprised when the doc, you know, when he started to come and I'm like, the doctor's yelling at me to push. I'm like, no, no, no. And then the doctor saw that it was wrapped around his neck and my son was like purple. So I think he had a birth experience. You know, some people have near death experiences at birth, but he was born completely purple, blue, and he didn't register. Anyway, they were able to revive him once they got the cord off and they ran off with him. And I was blessed with my son. And my daughter that I had later, same thing. I had communication from each of my children, and I had difficult births with each of them. So there is that, you know, to trust a mother's instinct. But that's another part of my story that I like to convey to people that, you know, our our pregnancies, you know, those spirits are always around us, you know, and coming in and out of that of our experience waiting to be born. So that was just something really beautiful that I love to share about that.
That is beautiful. Do you feel like your life changed after that event? Well, because like your first one, you had some gifts that you brought back and your life was changed in a big way. Um, did the same thing happen? Even though you didn't remember the experience, did you still have life changes?
Yeah, and that's part of what brought the knowing that I had, but like I said, my later ones, you know, confirmed that's what it was. But there was just a knowing and a peace. I was more at peace about things, and having that deep connection with my son. Um, right around this time, well, actually, my second daughter was already born when my mother passed, and there was a big experience around that of after their communication that I like to share. So, along with all of that, kind of cemented in everything. My mother passed away in 2004 of metastasized uterine cancer. Um, and I helped her cross, and she came to me when she crossed. So I had a little bit of a shared death experience with her. Um, and so part of that knowing and between those death experiences, you know, I could help her. And I spoke to her about crossing and I told her, you know, it's okay to go and, you know, just follow the light and that we'd all be okay. Um, and and as her death communication, as we spoke of, She had told me she chose cancer. She was the matriarch. So, and we were all very, very close, so that we would have time to adjust that she was leaving, and it wouldn't be such a shock to our soul. But also, she said it was to help. She left when she did to help guide me and my daughters on our spiritual journey and to aid us from that side with our abilities. Um, but and she's a very, I want to say, powerful soul in the fact of the way she can connect. Um, but the experience in 2004 was like, I think about 2 weeks after she died. My son that I mentioned, he had some delays. They're not sure if it was, from the oxygen deprivation or what, but he was delayed in motor skills and speech and all of these things. So he was in like the birth to three program. So this is significant because he couldn't really write or talk, um, say many words for his age at the time. And what happened was I was just coming home, so I caught the tail end. My husband heard him talking upstairs to someone. Mind you, he wasn't very verbal, and he was having a full-blown conversation. So my husband went running up there, and here was my son drawing in my mother's favorite color, purple, the Japanese symbol for life. I came home right as this was happening. I didn't realize that my husband and my mom was very close. He never really had a mother figure that he was close to. So they had an arrangement that if there was life after death, that she would leave him an unrefutable sign. Well, this was sorry, this was their sign. And he was so freaked out. He was like trying to erase it. Like, this can't be happening. My husband's very scientific minded. And so he was running down the steps, like white as the sheet when I got home. He's like, "You gotta see this. I don't know what's going on." Like, your mom left a symbol, and after that, my son was more verbal. And we realized part of it was, and I got some information on this later spiritually, he didn't realize everybody wasn't telepathic like him. So he was having this whole internal dialogue, not knowing why we weren't connecting with them. This became very apparent when he started repeating people's thoughts, and I had to get called into the school because he was repeating the teacher's private thoughts and telling her it's going to be okay. So I had to have a little talk with him that we can't talk about this. So there was a lot of spiritual things going on after that, as well as there's one instance with my children. By that time, the my third daughter had been born, and we had this giant uh, china cabinet filled with all different collectibles. And this particular day, we don't even know how. My daughter was sitting next to it. My son and I was in front of it, and my other daughter, I think, was like in the baby swing. She was a baby, and it crashed. And my son was right in front of it. Like, I was freaking out, going, it killed my son. But like, or would, it was all simultaneously. It's like everything slowed down, and my daughter and I both remember, like, there was this like bright light that just scooped him up and shoved him across the room because he was right. I mean, as fast as and heavy as it was, there's no way he would have made it over to me in that time. So I was so freaked out. I had to call my husband home from work because there's glass everywhere. I have three little kids, and that just happened. So so there was a lot of like divine little things that kept happening that I knew that my life just wasn't normal compared to other people. So I hope that answers your question in a long about way, but we're always safe and we're always protected. My mother says that quite often to me, like, have no fear whatsoever. Just keep moving on with your mission. Nothing, absolutely nothing can harm you. So,
Do you continue to hear from your mother? Do you have a direct line of communication or does she come and go?
well, she's come through various mediums, and my daughter, because often she tells my daughter, I just can't get through to Lorelai. She'll come through my daughter with messages, my oldest daughter. But she leaves me ones like she'll visit in cardinals and hummingbirds, and she likes to actually talk to me when I actually hear from her is like if I'm taking long drives alone, like when I go off to the store or somewhere I have to go. That used to be our thing. Her and I would go on these long drives. So that's like when she comes to me. So yeah, I still get some things, but I know she's always guiding. And sometimes when different people, even other, she's she told a mediumship group that they could always call on her because, she's able to connect. And so sometimes I ask her, like, if a soul isn't strong enough to make a good connection, I'll call her, or she'll even tell me, "I'm helping them, I'm here," because she's able to connect stronger. That's part of, like, the reason, like I said, she chose was to help us and help other people as part of her soul thing. She also told my daughter that it was for her to help and expand and heal. Like, it's not like almost lives vicariously, but through my daughter and I's relationship, she is healing and learning on the other side as well. So she's constantly like shifting between our perspectives and guiding and watching our relationship to help heal like her and I's relationship and things like that. So it's a mutual agreement that we're all helping each other. So
That's beautiful. It's so nice that she's able to keep in contact with you and to give you well, you kind of started giving her validation that there's an afterlife, and now she's over there letting you know for certain that it's true. So that's just a beautiful kind of full circle in your family. So you've had these two near-death experiences. You have amazing communication with your mother. What happens next? Because your life is just, it's like one after the other, experience after experience.
and I joke about that, like, my life is a spiritually transformative experience. You just have to learn to like take it in stride. For that, I've had so many experiences. I'm still skeptical. Like, I'm still trying to figure out, is there a rational reason? I'm, like I said, I was a medical assistant. I've always had a very thirst for knowledge. So I always want to make sense of everything. I've always been kind of like that. So that was a little bit more difficult because I just had to let go of what I thought reality was supposed to look like. It's much more expansive than I ever could have imagined, yet we imagine it into being, so it's kind of funny. But in our earthly logic, human collective consciousness, these things don't happen. Now we're shifting, and Spirit has showed me, we're shifting into a more expansive awareness. Where, back when I was having these experiences, people would be like, write a book. I'm like, I'm not ready to write a book. Or people need to know this. I'm like, I'm not ready to talk about this. I only spoke to who I was drawn to tell. And I know I skipped a lot of experiences, with the galactic and Sasquatch growing up, but um that has to do with the interdimension of I wanted to say interdimensionality, but that's not even a word of our being, that I've had all these contacts. And spirit often, it says orb contact. My mother, and I'm pretty sure it was my mom because after that was the communication showed up in a giant like rose pink orb. And my daughter and I both experienced it, even though we weren't together at the time. We were in the same home, but for me, this orb came through my window to my bed, kind of hovered around and expanded slightly, and then was gone. And within that same time period, it almost seemed simultaneously, it had come into my daughter's room, but it had interacted with her and expanded in front of her and was like interacting with her person and then left. Um, so to me, and the Sasquatch come through in orbs when I was young, that some of the orb activity that my family had that they called extraterrestrial at the time, not knowing that Bigfoot was this interdimensional being. They prefer to be called Sasquatch, but just so people know, I'm talking about the same type of being. Um, and so there were, in my childhood, it was this big green glowing orb that was following people and made this weird musical sound. Um, but we also had, pounding on our home, finding the giant footprints. And those that are familiar with Sasquatch activity, my brothers were hunters and trappers, and they literally took the trees down way up high, higher than a bear, anything else, and knocked them down towards the road. They cleared the whole space, trying to scare my brothers not to trap anymore, and it worked. My brothers took me to see it, so I saw it in person, all the damage around every trap. And anyway, so I had those type of things and memories of galactic things. So as I got older, there was other type of experiences. that I now know were them, So I had various experiences of like lost time, or remember seeing a bright light and then a loss of time. Um, so I know there was other contact. So it expanded my interdimensional contact, I guess you could say, as far as the.
Do you feel like your near death experience when you were 7 years old kind of opened up a portal so that you were more connected to these interdimensional beings or other realms of existence?
Yes, I do. I have a deeper understanding of, how consciousness projects from the galactics, from the work that I do. Uh, so from my understanding, not all souls consciousness is here in the physical reality the same way, through some of the work I've done and the contact I've had. So I think it opened that up so that I was aware of those streams of consciousness, I guess you could say. Um, because in my beyond quantum hypnosis, which I do have a private link to, I talk about that I had been Sasquatch many lifetimes. Like that was one of my incarnations, and that's where my shamanic and portal and vortex abilities come from. Hearing that and hearing myself say that on a recording was kind of trippy, right? And I've also been given, and I don't claim this. This is just one of the things that was through that, was that like I was a hybrid this time. So that's why I still have those abilities. And that was kind of like the progression of my soul to be able to do that, to connect everyone to this. And that's the work I do, to like connect all the aspects of your soul into one frame of consciousness. Because part of what spirit keeps showing me is that we're going to a point of singularity, like that we know what's going on in all the incarnations of consciousness. And so it was kind of interesting for me, because within the session work I do, is that it gave me more and more answers, because I realized that, like, and through my third death experience, which I'm sure we'll get to, that these parallel, because to me they're parallel consecutive lives, you know, affect this one, and my knowledge and my expansion, everything. It's like each one pulls the other forward. They show me like a ladder, like I'm constantly pulling the next one up and the next one up, seven back, seven forward kind of thing. Like I'm always expanding the consciousness of my whole oversoul, I call it. Like where my personality complex came from is what I call it, the fractal of divinity that I am. And I became more and more connected to that, um and able to use those portals and vortexes almost like I always call it almost like a remote viewing, or like a scrying ability, that I could see through them and to people's other lives, their galactic incarnations. Sometimes like their dragon aspect, when I talk about dragons, would appear and want to work with them. From my understanding, they're interdimensional, and they were like the first guardians of Earth. But there's so much more. I mean, that's a whole side subject. But so a lot of that, yeah, opened up through these experiences. And with each experience, how some people have one near death experience and they're like, I'm made to come back. I didn't want to come back. Well, by the fourth and fifth one, I'm like, give me back in there. My third one, I said, I wanted to come back for my daughter. My fourth one, I was like, get me back in there. I knew it was supposed to come and what my part was in it. And I'm like, I worked too many lifetimes to see this happen. I am not going to miss it. So I think with each experience and each multidimensional and spiritual transformative experience of consciousness, changes your perception. Like, so I wasn't made to be here. It was a gift to be here. But if you'd asked me to like write a book after that seventh experience, I'd be like, I was forced to be here. I don't know. So, y- you know, um, so each one was a gift to expand my awareness, even though, they were traumatic events. I never, like I had previously mentioned to you, want to glorify the near death experience. How I started speaking my truth was I wrote this thing in Ned's near death experience group about how you don't have to die to learn to live. And you don't. It's just a matter of making loving choices for yourself, having that accountability and responsibility of the part that you play in the world and where what your thoughts create. Uh, and all of that plays into your expansion of awareness, you know.
Where do you think is the next step? You've had your Are we on your second or your third near death experience?
We only got to 2, but that's
To
okay.
two, okay. And then we talked about the Sasquatch and the extraterrestrials, just touched on it. So tell me, now you've had your second near death experience. What happens in your third near death experience?
Well, this one is fairly brief in the sense that I'd lost blood flow to my brain, and I started to like zone out, you know, like how the blackness starts to fill in. And I guess according because my husband and my daughter were there, I started staggering backwards, which I don't remember, which was probably at least 6 foot that I like staggered backwards. And I fell over, hit my head against the door jamb and appeared to seizure and stopped breathing. And it was all in an instant, you know, but it didn't feel like that for me. Um, I guess I was slumped over at an odd angle. But for me, I was instantly in this what I call it Heaven City, because that's just where I call it like where the spirit guides and everything work from. And I was instantly on this like marble park bench, sitting next to a being that looked like my mom. But I instantly knew just because of how my I am, I don't know. And they were kind of contrite that I recognized right away. I'm like, you're not my mom. You're not that energy, you know, but they look like my mom. And they said, you know, it's all telepathic, like, you know, this is for your benefit. You know, we wanted you to be calm. And they told me I had done enough now. And in my mind, it was like I had put it in a positive balance. I had done enough. I could stay, you know, with my experience. Um, And I remember, like, instantly going, "No, my daughter needs me. I need to get back. I'm going back." And next thing I was in my body, and I, like, just lurched up, like, instantly, I freaked them out because I just, like, lurched up and go, "Oh my god, I just died. I saw my mom," and I just started just ugly crying, right? And, but through that experience, you know, and this plays back to that pain in my side, um I had done a hypnosis technique that, you know, so I did know a little bit about this, but it was like I felt like in that experience I forgave it, and that's why I came back to my daughter. These were like remembrances that came later because in a past, what we call past life, but concurrent life, I was a cobbler, a male cobbler in it seemed like the 1800s England kind of thing, and I saw this cobblestone bridge, and my workshop was in town, but I was crossing the bridge to go home after work, so it was like dusk. And these 2 robbers had come up from the other side out of these trees and crossed the bridge, like kind of met me on the edge of the middle. And one had like a musket kind of gun. You know how they had the handguns with the musket with the ball, you know, the little they were hair trigger. And so he had that on me and his accomplice was there and they just asked me for all my belongings. He wanted my coin purse is first what he started with. So I remember seeing like grabbing it out of like my breast pocket and handing it to him. But then they wanted like I guess they had like a gold pocket watch or something. They wanted my watch. So, but the other guy's like, come on, let's go to the guy with the gun. You know, because they had gotten the money. He's like, let's just go, you know, before somebody hears us kind of thing. And what happened is, you know, pulling on him, like I said, that's just a little musket. It went off. And then they were freaking out that they shot me, you know, and say, I'm so sorry. And they ran off. But so it lodged right in that same space, right under my right like rib there. And I made my way home and I you know, I slumped together. I don't know how I got inside. I just remember that I came through the door and I collapsed in my wife's arms and my daughter was at my feet. But I had the realization in this experience that it was the same daughter, you know, just
Mhm.
another lifetime. I died on her on the same age. So it was kind of consecutive, like because I made such a loving choice, you know, like I got to come back because I made that loving so to be with my daughter, because I wasn't, because like she has past life memories of, you know, having to live on the wharf and them struggling, you know, because I was their provider and because they lost me. So and, you know, so I wasn't gonna do that to her again, so I chose to come back. And that pain, never came back after I had forgiven these guys because they didn't mean to harm me. That was never their intention. So by forgiving them and having that level of forgiveness, I released that pain that I'd had my whole life.
Wow, that's amazing that you were able to actually remember a life where your daughter was still your daughter and how you died, and to make a sacrifice to help her in her suffering, or to help her prevent her suffering in this lifetime.
Yeah, it was, yeah, and I've since known that like we like to incarnate together. For me and my husband have incarnated together quite a bit. So,
Do you think that you have a soul family that you stay with, that you incarnate with over and over and over?
it seems to be, and I've found other members of it that I have other lives with, which is sometimes a little complicated because you have this life with them, or even some of them even remember their life with you, but you're living a different story here and now. So that can be kind of hard. But yeah, I've met many members, and I think because of having my death experience, like that energy brought them to me, or the realization. Like now I have a lot of experiences in the quantum field where I'm having conversations with people before I even meet them, or to bring them into my experience. So the fourth death experience and getting my Reiki attunements was huge. And because I'm a Reiki Master Teacher, and even if you don't want to be a practitioner, I just and that's what another reason I wanted to become a teacher, because I knew what the first two attunements did for me. Like that, they totally locked in my clairs and expanded my medical intuitive ability, like hyperspeed, and this multidimensional, and being able to go to the quantum field between the Reiki attunements and then that fourth death experience. I think like just really opened me up to so much.
Do you feel like you get kind of like an upgrade with each near death experience? Your vibration goes a little higher and then a little higher,
Yes.
and then now you're here, you're a Reiki master, you're getting these attunements in the near death experience, and now you've had a fifth near death experience as well,
Right.
which just happened recently.
Right, and I'd like to talk about the 4th because that was the most profound, if that's okay.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
the 5th one was the only one, like, I just went to the void, anyway, but, um, the 4th one was interesting. I had some autonomic nervous system issues going into this. I'm not sure exactly what triggered them, but I kept freezing, like, literally freezing up, not being able to swallow or stop breathing, just some weird things up until this point. And so I had stopped breathing in my sleep. And my first memory was I was already up in that like cloud type experience. There was no light, but it was what you would call probably my soul family. My daughter and my husband were to the left. Um, my what I've come to know as my twin flame was in front of me, and then a dear friend was on the side. So those like their energy signatures, my mind knew. So like they looked physical. The rest appeared to be like I knew there was other people there, and I have a further remembrance now after my other experiences that there were other beings there. They looked more like shimmery light bubbles, like there was other many other beings there. But I felt I call it being called to the principal's office, because they told me at my level of light, that's exactly what they said. Your level of light, you have to watch what you say and what you put into the experience, because it's going to manifest super fast. What I had done, I have to laugh about this. I was very active in, like I said, Ned's near death experience group on Facebook. And someone had posted a meme saying lame ways we died, to kind of make light heart of. And I'm a jokester. I laugh at things I probably shouldn't have. That's kind of spirit. Spirit finds it all a joy and humor. And anyway, so I said I wanted to be like grandpa, not like the passengers in his car. If you've ever heard that joke, he fell asleep, crashed the car, right? Mhm. And so I said I wanted to go to my sleep. Well, 2 weeks later, there you go. Yeah, I no longer joke about that. Anyway, so for me, excuse me, my nose wants running. Um, so they pointed that you created this, and that I wasn't doing what I said. I had a 2019 experience with Christ consciousness where I literally saw the earth as a thought form be created and all these things play out. And, I was told, what I should do, and I have to speak about this and like rectify the things that I had done. So that was a profound STE and Kundalini awakening. And when I came in from that particular experience, even my daughter's like, "You're not my mom. Your energy's different. You're not her." Because I had connected to this Christ consciousness. Anyway, and that was in 2019. So in 2021, when I had this experience, they're like, you were supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be speaking your truth. You want to go back, you need to speak your truth. Um, but it was also like a shared death experience, because during this, excuse me, it was like simultaneous conversation to my twin flame, who was telling me all about these things and the lessons, and my friend, um, who she was telling me, like, if you want that body, you have to get back in it now. And I'm like, I don't know how, like I couldn't remember. And I remember trying to connect with my body and getting in my body, and then they're like, you need to do a systems check. They literally called it a vehicle, that I need to get in my vehicle and do a systems check. And so like they had me move my energy from my feet all the way up. Um, but anyway, they said to restart the vehicle, I had to swallow. And this plays into both my fourth and fifth experience. And I in between those, I met a friend who also was told to swallow. So I wonder if there's something to that. So I had to swallow, and then the minute I swallowed, then I was able to like gas a huge deep breath in. And as soon as I did that, it was like a horse kick to the chest. I mean, it was painful, like when my heart started. But then with the systems check, they had me go from my feet up, and you know how like it feels when your hand or arms asleep. Well, that was like amplified. Can you imagine your whole body like that? That's literally what it felt like. And I shook for like 20 minutes afterwards. Like, you know how like it's almost like from being in the medical field, it's almost like I felt like maybe I went into shock. Like I literally was vibrating. I felt like I was vibrating off my body, but like my whole body was shaking. But there's more to the other side part of this, because I remember there was some sort of test, and I don't know what the test was. And what's interesting is my twin flame said the next day, like, he's like, what happened to you? I know you died. Something happened to you. He's like, and I had to help you perform some test. And that was like the total thing. And my friend, the other friend I saw, had seen me laying dead in my bed. So she had this whole vision of me laying dead in my bed. So it was kind of like a shared death, and it validated. I'm like, oh my God, it really did happen, and that happened. So that really freaked me out. But it was the whole thing about the power of words and how things are created, that they were telling me. And they're like, you have to bring this information back. And I'm like, what do you want? Human means a ditz. I'm going to forget the minute I get there. Because I was watching myself and my life and everything. Such a debt. Like I was judging myself. Anyway, and so they were telling me how, words and thoughts create, to be mindful how we use them, and the emotions behind them, and just to warn me like how fast things would manifest. And they got worse after that, better or worse, because I found with manifestation, I have found it's like, when you're in a state of joy, things manifest really fast, when you because you're in such a high frequency. So if you notice from really studying it, like, things happen super fast when you're in that flow, and it's just a thought, where sometimes we're like, oh, I want to set an intention, I want to manifest it, and nothing seems to move really. So I noticed that the things that I manifested were just things that like I was happy or knew and believed could manifest. It got to the point where my husband's like, just stop it, because I kept saying, oh, I want this kind of cat and this kind of cat, and literally the cats would appear at our door and on its hind feet and knock. That happened like 2 or 3 times with different cats. And my husband's like, that's it. He's like, I can't deny it anymore. Stop asking for cats. I kid you not, because I'm like, my cat, the stray cat, I'm like, oh, I hope she's pregnant. And I was like, oh, I hope she has a orange cat. I want an orange cat like Garfield. Well, I didn't say fluffy cat. So she had 2 orange kittens, were the only ones that made it out of this litter. But then I'm like, but I really wanted a fluffy orange cat like Garfield. Knock, knock, knock on my door. There's a fluffy cat that looks like Garfield. I mean, it was just, and it was within like days. Sometimes certain things were like within hours, sometimes a half hour. I was like really in the field of consciousness. So, and same with bad, the things we fear, like they would just show up. So I learned to be very more mindful of my emotions and my thoughts. Because if I was in the stream of consciousness, okay, because in the void of creation, everything's going on at once. And from what I saw was that, the more I attached to something, the more I pulled it into my experience. And I actually had an experience like um, a year ago with Archangel Michael, where he like I was really upset because a health thing I thought I had gotten over reappeared. And I'm like, I was really frustrated because it was like taking like 6 months to try to heal this. And I was like, help heal me so I can be of service or get me the F out. I was like really demanding. And so he like pulled me almost out of body and showed me, he's like, I can't remove something you've already pulled into your experience. I can only help ease your attachment to it so it moves through your experience faster. And then I had this whole remembrance of, oh wow, oh gosh, because the more, and it's the same way I pulled in being sick, because the more I fed it, the more I took meds, the more I did all of these things, um, the more I created sickness. And he showed me it was the same thing. The more I fed the thought form, the more it would materialize and the bigger it would become in my experience. Because in pre-planning, from my understanding of it, there's all these potentialities even when we can leave this world, right? And so you can experience a cold or pneumonia. It depends upon, whatever you're aligning with, you're choosing that timeline. So I just kept hanging on to, oh my God, I have this in all the fear and everything I was feeding it. So, I had made it a bigger thing than it needed to be in my experience. So that was really, really profound for me as a remembrance going, oh boy, you know, um, so learning that level of detachment that I don't have to create these things, and how deep I want to experience them is up to me, and how things are pulled into our experience, because they showed me, and I've had experiences with this of various timelines. And sometimes I'll even see it play out on a screen, like the akashic record of, okay, this is the timeline you can experience. If you make this choice, that's where you're going. I've had that in real time, and even had a joint experience with my daughter of choosing a timeline that we both perceived. So I think that happened twice with two different things. So I know, like, it's all in my frequency and thought forms what I'm choosing for myself. Everything is available. We are limitless. We can experience whatever we're choosing, but by mastering our emotions and being mindful, we can choose it consciously, if that makes sense.
It does
And
make sense. Yeah.
so that was a very profound realization. And I'll just quick go over the fifth because it's just as simple. It was December 19th. I was bad and I ate some things which had MSG because I wasn't aware it had MSG, and so it triggered my autonomic again. And I stopped breathing and went to the black void. And I'm like, oh, it was very, very peaceful and comforting. It was like being in a hug, but there was nothing. Like I've always gone somewhere, so I was kind of freaked out. Like, what is this? It's just like being in the womb of the universe. You're just in this black void, and I'm like, where's my body? And then I was more like, oh crap, I died again, didn't I? Because I thought I was done with the death experience. I'm like, I'm doing what you want, but it was more for a healing, which I'll get into. But yeah. So it was the same kind of thing about, I remember that, I needed to swallow and then this voice was like, there's only death because you believe it exists, came into my head. I'm like, well, screw that. I don't want to experience that. And I was back in my body. And it was the same thing. Well, this time my heart was just slamming. Like I thought I was going to have an infarction, to be honest. It was that bad. And trying to breathe and calm my body, and what just happened to me. Because I honestly thought I was done with near death experiences. But it was, I feel, what I was given it was just that remembrance, like death only exists because you believe in it. And you're still validating death, and it doesn't need to be there or a part of your experience. Because consciousness and energy is neither, always exists. It's not created or destroyed. It only changes form. So that was like more the profound thing with that.
So after a lifetime of amazing experiences, Would you say that you're afraid of death?
No. I still have an anxiety about like not suffering to die. All of my experiences, I was out of my body before I could really suffer, so to speak. But that was my only thing. So I don't really even fear that anymore because I was always pulled away from it before I could have. But I also understand that it's my choice if I want to experience that suffering, if it would expand me somehow, you know. Um, so I don't have necessarily that fear. I certainly don't feel fear death because from my experiences now, I know I just switched and something that happened with an experience with my mom. I know we just like switch timelines. Our consciousness just moves on to the next one, that's available as ourselves or even another life. Um, so I know I don't cease to exist. So I don't have that fear. My personality, the complex that has made up me as the fractal of divine, continues wherever I go. It may be a little different in the sense, higher vibrations. I'm obviously more loving. Where here, sometimes I'm a human, so I'm just like, with my level of detachment, I'm like, you created this. I can't get you out. I can help you see how you created it. But, so maybe my empathy has switched a little because I'm like, you're creating this by your thought choices. And I still have that empathy because I remember being, you know, just as unaware at the time, of what I was creating. Now I can look back and look through everything going, oh God, I said that like 10 years ago and then I experienced it 5 years later. Okay, like I realize how I created different experiences. And I think was the hardest thing. I ugly cried in that 2019 experience, knowing all that accountability. Like I had created all that because I was one with consciousness. So I knew how consciousness had created all that and the chaos that appears to be this earth and that they told me in that experience, like Eden's always been here. It's a frequency. It's whatever you want to align with for your experience. You're driving the boat, and realizing that has empowered me, I guess, to share, and to be more mindful of what am I creating? What do I want to create? What do I want to experience? And if I'm experiencing something I didn't feel like I created, it's like, okay, well, what is the lesson in this? Um, was it part of my planning? There are some concrete things I feel that we choose to experience, but how we experience them is up to us. Like I told you, the level of attachment to it. Do I want a cold or do I want this? Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what has formed my perception of who I am. Like when I came back from these last few, they're like, you're no longer here for the Lorelei storyline. You are here to spread this message. You're here to do the work that you do and to help others to remembrance. You know, um, so that was a little different. Like I didn't have to play the character anymore. I could stay in observer view unless I was needed. And so having that 360 view of life and all the different potentialities that could be chosen and different timelines we can choose to experience has been very eye-opening in that sense of limitlessness, and I think that's what I want to convey the most. Like this is literally, they even advertise it like a carnival, like you can choose your own adventure with every choice, and every choice rules out other potentials. So do your best to choose a loving choice. It is not selfish to choose a loving choice for yourself because all are one. And if you make a choice that is love for you, you're putting love into the universe for everyone and every fractal of your being.
Well, I'm certainly grateful that you came back to share all of your experiences and that you were able to see the vision, articulate it, know that it was a purpose, maybe not the only purpose, but a purpose of all of these experiences where, to share these gifts. I feel like they're gifts to 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 the planet, to mankind. Um, so I'm eternally grateful to you for the sacrifices that you made. I know that it's easier probably to stay over there and live in bliss and with your loved ones, and this world is hard, and thank you for sharing. Do you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers?
Well, one thing I would like to impart as well is like our higher selves, that consciousness is always at home. So you never leave your loved ones. And they're always with you, around you, just because they're no longer manifesting in the physical for you, doesn't mean they cease to exist with you. And I think that's very important for people to realize, because that is what enables me to, you know, be what people would call a medium. I can speak to spirit, but I can also speak to anyone living in the quantum space and even to their higher self. Sometimes, when I'm gonna have a session with someone, their higher self will be like, well, they're not ready, or they're not gonna look at this, but tell them, and it'll eventually, relate to them. So I think that's one of the biggest things I want to say, um, is that is always available to you, and that everything is available to you. Um, and whether I don't know, I'm just being called to say stop judging yourself, and I don't know why that is. I'm listening to, people always wonder why I'm looking up, because sometimes I get messages, and I don't know who this is meant for, but it's like, stop judging yourself and your experience. You're here to have a human experience. You're gonna make mistakes, but don't live there. You get to choose who you are in every moment, and it's okay to let go of people that are trying to hold on to an old version of you.
If my viewers wanted to reach out to you, if they have more questions or they want to contact you for any reason, would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always happy to talk to anyone who's looking for, further awareness of what I've experienced. So thank you. Hmm.
And I'll link some information on how to contact you below in the description so anyone that's looking for that can easily find you. Thank you so much, Lorelei, for joining me. I mean, I know that I've told you thank you, I don't know, 100 times, and I could say it 100 times more. You've got so many experiences. I may have to have you on again to talk about the Sasquatch and the extraterrestrial and everything else that we didn't even touch on, because I know there's a whole lot more. So we'll keep in touch, but um, thank you for this. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And thank you for providing a space and holding space so those like me can share our experiences. It's very important work you do. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It is my absolute pleasure, my calling.
Yeah, and thank you for answering it and not being stubborn like me. No,
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people, and that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.